rock and roll bliss. The making the Purple album was great fun. Reimagining a lot of the songs that David did with Deep Purple, and the tour has really exceeded expectations. I mean, David just singing great, and such a great lineup to be out with, guys like Tommy Aldridge and Reb Beach, and of course Michael Devin and Michele Lupi, and just a great bunch of guys, man. It's like great musically and personality-wise right now. We're having a lot of fun.
Well, it looks like it. Whitesnake's always been a great band, and the new evolution, the new chapter seems like it's, having a great time. People, really, I think, miss it. So being out there with some of that classic music, it's the perfect summer show.
Thanks, man. I mean, yeah, I think 3 months. We just hit out on the North American run for 3 months or so, and not a single bad review, man. Everything was really nothing but positivity, and like I said, man, it just felt like a rock and roll bliss. It was like, wow, I'm really loving playing this set list. Of course, getting to play all the Whitesnake hits, but plus having like those killer like Deep Purple jams in the set was awesome, and like everybody's getting along off stage too, which goes a long way. There was just no animosity or any kind of that stuff going on, so it just felt really good.
Well, yeah, I mean, opening with Burn, I mean, it takes you all the way back to David's first show with Deep Purple, watching those videos of the California Jam, and I mean, you can only imagine his first show with Purple. He goes out in front of like 300,000 people.
Yeah, that's where David's tradition of screaming "Are you ready?" at the top of the show is from. He went out for his first show with Purple, and he was just so amped up he didn't know what to do with the energy, and that's what he let go. He just screamed out. So it was very instinctual and guttural, and he's done that every show since. So I asked him about that. I was like, "Where did you get that, and when did that start?" And I just thought that was a cool story. Goes all the way back to his first show at Deep Purple.
Yeah, and of course here at the L.A. show, Glenn Hughes came out and joined you, so that Purple connection, all the way back, when those.
Yeah, man, that was a little bit of rock and roll history right there. And as cool as it was having Glenn out on stage, which was awesome, it was super fun and maybe even better to be backstage, because we had to kind of run through those songs in this tiny little dressing room together. I mean, we're all right on top of each other, holding our guitars, playing basically with no amps or anything, and just to be in the room and hearing Glenn and David sing together for the first time in all those years, and just have it be all totally stripped down with no PA or no amps or anything. It was really cool, man.
Well, I know the tight quarters backstage there, and yeah, it must have been magical. It's just reliving
it was a pretty
those
cool moment.
That, God,
yeah,
it must have been 40 years ago that they made that music together.
Yeah, I believe it had been like almost that long since they had been on stage together as well.
Oh,
so I mean, yeah, it's been a while. So pretty cool to be a part of, for sure.
Well, if we could go back, I know you grew up in a musical family, and your parents were classical musicians, and you started with the cello and the piano. I myself, I started with the cello and I played guitar before I got involved in the business side. But what a great instrument to start with. Talk about the classical background that you have and what that brings to the rock.
Yeah, I think at that age, really, I didn't want a whole lot to do with it, but I'm glad my parents had me on it. I just think growing up in a house of music happening all the time, and learning how to read as a kid, read music, and developing a sense of pitch and a sense of rhythm and all that stuff was very helpful. To be honest, I mean, that whole time, I basically was like, I just want to be a baseball player. I was really young. I wasn't like I wouldn't say like a child prodigy or anything like that, but then I heard AC/DC, man, and everything changed. I wanted to play guitar, and I got completely into playing music, so
sure.
They really changed the game for me.
Well, the deal my mother made with me, I saw the Beatles and Ed Sullivan, and I begged her for a guitar, and she said, I'll get you a guitar only if you also play in the school orchestra. So she had that idea of kind of coming up balance, and I, like you, I was much more interested in the rock bands and all the great stuff coming up in that era. But I think it gives you a musical depth to pull from, and of course looking at people like the Ritchie Blackmores and so many guys that you could just tell had a classical, influence just really helped you.
Yeah, it really does, and I think somewhere inside me all the time too, I kind of always evaluate my performance based upon like going back to that. Like, how was it really musically? Like, I don't go so far on what the critics would think or what the fans would think, but like kind of just go off of the musical fundamental side a lot of times and go, did I play the best I could? Did I play clean? And so I think that's helpful to have that in my background, because I think it keeps me honest too, in terms of not just buying into the whole like, oh, I was great. If I stunk, I stunk.
Yeah. So. Well, being raised up in Chicago in the Midwest, tell us about discovering Angus Young. What album was it, and did you actually get a chance to see him any of those early days, or what was like the first big arena show you went to?
Yeah, Back in Black was the album that really changed everything for me. I mean, what a great album to have change your childhood and your life too. I mean, like every song on that album is just killer. And believe it or not, I never went to an AC/DC show, despite the fact that they totally changed everything for me. I think the period that I was enamored with was like the Bon Scott stuff and really the first two with Brian Johnson, and then I kind of fell out of love with it, to be honest with you, in terms of like the quality of it. And I was too young to go when Back in Black and For Those About to Rock came out. I was, but my first show I went to was Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind tour, and Quiet Riot opened.
With a giant Eddie, must have blown your mind.
It was pretty cool, man. I was in 7th grade, and they were part of that whole group of bands that, as a kid, really just had the inspiration going for me. I'd say, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Ozzy, the Scorpions, Iron Maiden, all that stuff was just huge for me as a kid starting out in terms of just being a good inspiration to get me going.
Sure. Well, now tell us how it evolved into you joining, the great Night Ranger, and what Brad Gillis and Jack Blades, instilled in you and in your rise to what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, the way that worked out was I was living in the suburbs of Chicago, and I was in the house band for a guy named Jim Peterick every year at these events called World Stage. Jim, people would know probably best from the band Survivor, and he's known as like the guy who wrote Eye of the Tiger and all those songs. Yeah, but he also he founded the Eyes of March. He wrote Vehicle, and he co-wrote those 38 Special songs like Hold On Loosely and Caught Up in You. Co-wrote Heavy Metal with Sammy Hagar. He's had a lot of hits. Anyway, Jim would have these shows once a year called World Stage, and he'd have all his friends come out and sing their hits, and he'd have a house band. So Kelly Kagi, the drummer from Night Ranger, was there really every year. And he'd come out and sing the Night Ranger hits, and I was in the band, and it probably wasn't until we'd done that 6 or 7 years that everything kind of came to fruition with that, where he came in, and I realized there might be an opportunity to get my foot in the door there. And so, my audition for that band was a gig. I think it was like Reb Beach, my partner in Whitesnake, was actually doing the gig kind of temporarily for him until they found somebody. And Reb needed to miss a show, and so they had me fill in on no rehearsal. I just learned the huge set. I mean, it was like 25 songs or something like that. And went out and just did a gig with them. Yeah, it was totally terrifying, man, but it worked out well, and I had a great 7 years with those guys, and love them, man. I got nothing but good things to say about Brad and Jack, and I learned so much from those guys.
Oh yeah, they're walking history books, and of course Brad coming in right after Randy Rhoads, and I know you guys are involved in the Randy Rhoads tributes and all that, and of course Jack with his history and Damn Yankees and everything he's done. Now talk about coming into Rock of Ages, how that happened for you, and what that Broadway experience was like.
Yeah, so I had moved to New York, I guess, without knowing I was moving to New York to do a show called Love Janis, and it was a show about Janis Joplin, and ran for a couple years, and I was just kind of gigging around New York doing what I could. And one of the things I was doing was subbing for a friend of mine who lived 2 blocks away on just like pit shows. He's a pit musician. And sort of a bizarre route to get to being in Rock of Ages, but I subbed for him on this show called Tarzan in the Pit, and Phil Collins wrote the music for that. And as it turned out, the keyboard player from that show ended up becoming the music supervisor for Rock of Ages. So when it came time to put together a band for this 80s show coming to New York, he said, I remember a guy subbing on Tarzan, that rocker guy, and when he looked me up, he was like, oh, and now he's in Night Ranger on top of it. So this is like a perfect, cool coincidence. And so, yeah, I had a great run with that, I think over 6 years with Off-Broadway and Broadway in New York, 2,000 shows or so, just 8 shows a week. And it was a great thing because I could take off whenever I wanted to tour with Night Ranger or with Trans-Siberian Orchestra during that time. So it basically just allowed me to have a gig every day for that entire time period.
Amazing. And speaking of TSO, I know you still try and collaborate wherever you can with them. What's your experience like with that? I mean, obviously these guys have found an incredible niche of combining some of that classic rock and, style and sounds with, a holiday, celebration.
Yeah, I think Paul O'Neill's amazing in his dedication to give the fans their money's worth. And I always say there's something I can learn from every gig, and if there's something I can learn from TSO, it's that Paul is really dedicated to the fans and making sure that everybody that comes to a TSO show walks away feeling like they just saw something amazing and having a great experience. So for me, it's been an honor to be a part of a TSO this entire time, and I hope to continue the relationship with them down the road. And yeah, I mean, it's just a great group of guys there too. The band is a bunch of great players, and really across the board, everything is like top flight. They have a great crew, and obviously the best pyro and laser light show that there is.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, guys thinking outside the box. You hear musicians complaining all the time about, bands or situations or record labels, but these guys, they found a niche. They really looked at something that people weren't really tapped into, and they've created a monster holiday franchise.
I think as the years go by, what Trans-Siberian Orchestra is doing becomes more and more special because you don't really see a whole lot of opportunity for hard rock guitar players to play in arenas anymore. And to be doing that 2 shows a day and 8 shows a week while you're out on that tour. So on any given day, let's say you're playing Q Arena in Cleveland and both shows are sold out at 15,000 people, you're playing for 30,000 people that day and you're playing hard rock. I mean, it's really a great, valuable experience to get that kind of stage time and not just banging away in a club, but actually playing for huge audiences.
Sure. And we loved your appearance on that metal show, and I know Eddie Trunk had something to do with recommending you to David Coverdale. Tell us about that experience of working with the metal show, and of course, Eddie Trunk's support of this whole music.
I think Eddie Trunk, for whatever reason, has really been on my side and been a believer in me since we met, since he saw me with Night Ranger, and he actually had me on that metal show as well when I was in Night Ranger, so it was actually my second time on the show. And, yeah, he's just been a great guy. I think he's a music lover, and I think Eddie genuinely enjoys doing nice things for people that he thinks deserve it, and he sees are working hard and that he believes in as players. So, tip of the cap to Eddie at all times. He's been really good to me. And being on that show, I mean, it's one of my favorite shows to watch, quite honestly. It's like...
I know, they don't make enough episodes. It's like, come on, what's the deal?
Well, it's like the only thing I can turn on TV where I go, wow, they're speaking my language. It's like an inside language that...
I know, it's just over too soon. We love the archives, but it's too bad it's not like a online show where they can make a new episode every week. We definitely know there's a lot of deserving musicians out there, a lot of great music being made, and it's never been more challenging without the MTVs of the world. Obviously with Whitesnake, you guys have a built-in legacy. I mean, obviously the fans from the MTV era come out, but it's a little more challenging. Talk about your new album 13 and kind of some of the plans that you have. I know this is your 4th album. Talk about kind of some of your strategies, how to get it out these days, and how to survive as a musician outside, Whitesnake.
Well, I think just to survive as a musician just takes that being productive on a daily basis mentality. You just have to treat it like a job and make sure that you're being productive, whether that be practicing your instrument and working on your flat-out musical ability and music skills, or if it's networking or promoting or whatever needs to be done to make sure that you're going to build a career, which is a different thing than being a great player, by the way. That should they can lend a hand to each other, but they also are not the same thing. There's lots of great players who haven't built a great career as well. So it's its own special trick. In terms of the Joel Hoekstra's 13 album, I released 3 solo albums years ago that were primarily instrumental guitar records that really showcased my guitar ability for the most part. And so I had a lot of people, now that I've been in Night Ranger and in Whitesnake, asking, how come you don't make an album that's just like a straight-ahead rock album with vocals? And I decided to do that. And so I called in favors to basically all my favorite musicians out there. The lineup on this thing is just unbelievable. I got Russell Allen and Jeff Scott Soto singing on it, 2 of the best singers in rock today, in my opinion. And Vinny Appice from Dio and Black Sabbath on drums, and Tony Franklin from The Firm and Blue Murder on bass, and Derek Sherinian from Dream Theater and Black Country Communion was kind enough to be the special guest keyboard player on it. So I just can't thank those guys enough for bringing, these rock songs of mine to life. I did all the writing on it, words, melodies, the whole 9 yards. And I guess the end result is, I would describe as it's Dio-ish at its heaviest and Foreigner-ish at its lightest. It's just straight-ahead melodic hard rock, and I hope that I've made an album that the rock fans and people that have known me from this genre, I hope they can get on board and dig it.
Well, it sounds amazing. Of course, Jeff Scott Soto, his voice is so great, and Russell. I mean, you got some amazing people. Being around the creative community and seeing you guys not only at NAMM and of course all the Randy Rhoads tributes and the Bonzo Bash and all the stuff going on these days, it seems like the musicians really have each other's back. I mean, it's like a mutual love fest, at these events with you guys, and it's amazing to see everybody step up and help each other. I mean, what do you think it is about that camaraderie, about the working musicians out there? They're so quick to, back somebody up without asking, how much am I getting paid, and, what's in it for me?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just the nature of the business these days. It's tougher out there to stay busy and to make money, and so I think a lot of people just like the process of it. And I also think it's not as we grow older, our fan base grows older. So I think we don't need everybody to be 13 years old looking at an album cover imagining that a band only sees the guys in their own band for their entire life. And I remember that vision as a kid and that dream, but I think as we get older, I think our fans are maturing as well, and they realize we're making a living playing music, and we're all doing what we love, and hopefully we're giving people like cool stuff that they dig. I mean, obviously, I'm not just making the album to stay busy. I'm making an album to hopefully give people some killer music that they enjoy. So we'll see. It was definitely a labor of love for me, and I hope that comes across.
And what can you say about a company like Frontiers? I mean, they've really stepped up and helped a lot of these bands that weren't necessarily the flavor of the week, with these aging, multinational conglomerates that, think people are over the hill by the time they're 20, What can you say about labels like Frontiers that have, been very supportive of melodic hard rock?
Well, they're helping to keep it alive, aren't they? I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's about all we can hope for. Is just that collectively we can keep a cool rock scene alive, and it's obviously getting harder and harder. But much appreciation goes to Frontiers from me for the opportunity to make this album, and like I said, I think they've done a great job of making sure that melodic hard rock is alive and at least somewhat well.
Yeah, it seems like these days with the evolving, music industry out there, it's, it's up to people like them and ourselves to just create these little ecosystems. And maybe they're not as big as they once were, but like you say, if people can make a living doing what they love to do, you're a rich man.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge, huge thing right there that you just said. For me, yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky to be doing this, to be able to make a living playing rock guitar is like one of the best jobs anybody could ever want. And I never had to make any kind of career decision in my life. I picked up the guitar when I was 11, and I liked it, and here I am. That's the way I feel. So hopefully that can continue on, because I don't know how to do anything else, I think I'd be screwed if I had to go to waiting tables or something.
Yeah, well, I think there's a definite future for you. Now, when you give advice to the young players and the young bands coming up today, I know business-wise it's tough because it's a constantly evolving, ecosystem out there. But as far as creatively, mastering your instrument and the dedication it takes to hang in there to not only create your own style and sound, but to persevere to find your audience. What do you tell these, the young bands and players today?
Well, I think the main thing is that you get back what you put into it, so you have to work really hard. If you're looking around and you see other people working at it harder than you, then it's probably not going to work out for you. You have to always be working harder than the other guys, and I think it's really important to kind of keep your eye on the positive stuff. When people ask me about the music business, what do you think of the music business today? I mean, realistically, I'm not going to change the music business, so my mind can't really go to, oh, man, it's so tough, you can't make any money selling albums, and I try to avoid that type of thinking because it's really detrimental to you persevering and continuing on. You just have to kind of focus on the positives of like, well, what can I control? I can control working hard on it every day, and hopefully the money will come. I think you definitely have to make an investment to get there in the music business. You're probably not going to get into it to make money these days. You'd probably, and if you are, I suggest you reevaluate, because you could get into a lot of other trades in life and make money a lot easier, certainly. But yeah, I think just staying positive in terms of like how can you be productive, and that's how you just baby steps, man. Baby careers grow in baby steps.
Well, I know music has meant so much to, both of us, growing up, and I think it's such an important part of our, social fabric out there, and losing music programs in schools is really hard to see, and, the evolving of technology that, kind of downplays the creative side is very challenging. So I think the mindset is super, super important, that if you love what you do and you do it well, those opportunities will come. But, Joe, we can't thank you enough. The album is 13, and we're going to spread the word, and we can't wait to continue to see you out on the road with Whitesnake and much more music with TSO and everything in the future. Thanks so much for joining us, Joel.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.